Welcome to a new corner of my home. Since Governor Tony Evers here in Wisconsin has declared safer at home and we're all supposed to be at home, I thought at least you could see a different part of my home. There are many beautiful areas here. In this part of the house, I've got a quilt that I made that's stretch canvas style with lots of layers, as well as a quilt where I taught myself to quilt left-handed, and then my left hand hurt for a while, so I decided maybe that's not what I should be doing. But it's a piece that I made about trying. I wanted to visualize what did it look like to try something over and over again. I also have an embroidery that I did many years ago on my shelf. It's almost become a little bit of an altar for me here. This is a sculpture of my grandmother, and she is the person that that made a quilt for me when I was born, and my biggest quilt influence in my life. So that said, we're working on our Scavenger Hunt Quilt, and it's in the QuiltCon Magazine. You can still download it digitally if you would like, or you can follow along just virtually here and get each step revealed to you one by one instead of being able to read them all in advance. I already talked to you this week about the orbit block, and you found out that I am a night person with that block. The next block that we need to make this week is step number 6, nature. So, contemplate your personality until you find an animal or plant that closely resembles your own nature and create an applique block that relates. For example, my dearest childhood comfort object was a rabbit, and I find I still have much in common with them today. I could applique a rabbit silhouette, a cottontail, a burrow, or rabbit ears. So, I'd like to introduce you to Bobby. Bobby was my childhood comfort object. She proudly wears a t-shirt that says, "Heidi, I love you." And I remember wiping many tears as well as picking my nose with her ears as a child. She got lost one time when we searched through the woods to find her, and she continues to have a safe place in my home to this day. I got really excited about the idea of an animal that connects to my personality probably a year ago. Sometimes I like watching videos on YouTube from a woman named Teal Swan, and she has a lot of metaphysical and spiritual things on her site. Especially as a yoga instructor, she talks about chakras, and her whole series on chakras is amazing. And she created a series on how to find your spirit animal, as well as created after that things about a plant and a mineral. And what she explains in those videos is that once we find an animal that we connect with, that we think is similar, has a similar personality to our personality, it can reveal a lot of powerful information about us. So I found that video useful. I know it is sometimes a controversial term to talk about a spirit animal, but it was a tool and something that gave me a lot of wonderful self-knowledge and insights to myself. So I'm appreciative of that resource. When I think about a rabbit, initially when I made this example quilt, I was thinking about listening and the ears of the rabbit. And I actually made it so that this chronological step that I had already made looked as though it was going into the ear of the rabbit. I think that also by that point in the quilt there weren't many other places where it could go, and so for just practical aesthetic reasons I put that in that location. But also, some of those things that I choose subconsciously sometimes are the most meaningful and powerful. And as I look at it now, I think about how in my art, I'm really interested in memory. For example, this whole series is about memory and inspired by Marcel Proust's book, Remembrance of Things Past. So it makes sense that these historical, autobiographical, chronological fabrics would be going into my ear as a rabbit. You can also see that I had a strong color palette in this with the golden yellow, and a rabbit is an animal of prey, and it is important for the rabbit to be blending in. And so for me, it felt as though a fabric that would blend in and be protective made sense for that block in particular. As I look at my new variation on this quilt, you can see, as I said before, that I don't have a whole lot of space left, and so certainly I don't know where I would put big rabbit ears if that's what I wanted to do again. However, it's not what I want to do again. I thought that I photographed it, but some of the most special memories for a person are when you don't take a photograph. So I vividly remember this winter, after having made that first variation of the quilt, that I got to see some rabbit tracks in my backyard in the snow. And it was so beautiful because when they hippity hop around, they put their front feet down, and then their back feet have so much momentum that on the tracks, the back feet are in front of the front feet as they hop around. And I feel as though rabbit tracks are another look at memory of where have I been, where have I been going. And so I'd like to put some rabbit tracks somewhere on my piece. I know that my instructions said applique fabric for your animal, but I've already had some people follow this pattern and use embroidery instead of applique. And I think that for me, that's going to be the most appropriate choice for my rabbit tracks. So I'm going to choose a location for them. I'm going to look up some well, I already have looked up some images of rabbit tracks on the internet. And then I'm going to use those photos as a guide to embroider the footprints of a rabbit wandering somewhere around my quilt. And who knows for exactly how long that rabbit will be hippity hopping around. But anyways, that is what I chose as my animal. And that's how I'm deciding to interpret it for this particular section of the quilt. It might take some self-reflection to see what plant or animal connects to you as you contemplate this block for yourself. I know that one person following online has already done an applique of a plant in her home because it felt appropriate for her for the touch step. So maybe there's an actual plant that's in your home that resonates with you, or maybe you would feel more connected to a plant than to an animal. I know, for example, my mother's first name is Holly, and whenever I see that plant or whenever I have occasion to make a drawing of holly berries and a couple holly leaves, that connects so deeply with my mother. My paternal grandmother, her name was Rosemary, and similarly, whenever I eat rosemary or smell rosemary, I think of that family member, and I think of my great-grandmother, who I never met, but who chose that as a name for her. So perhaps you'll have something that resonates immediately as connecting you to a plant. There is no wrong way to interpret this prompt. If you think about things found in nature and then how they resonate or connect deeply with you, that's what you're looking to add. And it can be applique or embroidery, and it might even be that the fabric you're choosing has that image on it. So perhaps I would find a fabric that has rabbits on them, or that has an image of a holly leaf on it. And then I could either choose something that, for a shape, there are already a lot of circles in here. maybe I would create another circle or some other shape, or maybe I would even trace something else important to me and who I am to use that as a shape for the fabric that has the animal or plant that connects to me and my personality on it. So it could be, an applique, could be an embroidery, could be just that that's the image on the fabric that you're working with. But I'm gonna get to work on this embroidery and then catch up with you guys and show you how it's going. Another example from my life is this plant that my mother gave me years ago. She always kept it in our house when I lived with her, and now I keep it on top of my bookcase. Maybe I could even physically trace one of those leaves, and that could be the way that I make something inspired by this plant. I also have these milkweed seeds that I have been saving and need to distribute soon for the butterflies. My great Aunt June on my mother's side, she loved butterflies very, very much. And the couch that I sit on all the time has a bird and berries. So no need to think too deeply. If you see something and it occurs to you right away, maybe that's the right path for you. I also have this sweet kitten print that I used on my quilt that I made during my artist residency at Have Company. And then it also has some wild horse fabric. My good friend Kathy made a skirt for her daughter Caitlin with that print, and then by coincidence I also own that print. When I was a kid, my mom used to say, "Hippity hop on over," and it's a reason why I feel connected to the rabbit, and also a reason why these footprints evoke a very fond memory for me of my mom understanding me and who I am. I was watching a webinar while embroidering, and so that's why I'm typing sometimes. It's a great opportunity to connect with other people. The embroidery took about an hour, and I embroidered it on the touch shape. So I had traced my face and my fingers and used an oil-colored fabric, and that's a routine that I have every day. And it's a very solid part of the quilt, and I thought that adding the embroidery would be visually unifying for it. It would help it stand out a little bit less and make it fit in more with the rest of the texture of the pattern and the quilt. In a moment, I'm going to start embroidering another set of paw prints, and I like the idea of seeing two rabbits hopping around, uniting for a minute, maybe interacting, and then continuing on their way. There are many attributes to the rabbit that I like. Some of them are the rabbit being nimble and fast, the quality of looking before I leap. Being a prey animal, they have to do that. Rabbits are very sensitive, highly aware of their surroundings, and that reminds me of being a highly sensitive person, an HSP, which is something I talk about a lot. Rabbits are connected with creativity, with making, being fertile, but in the sense of just being creation and creating a lot. It's also a romantic animal. The rabbit is soft and gentle and playful and clever. You may also notice that I'm wearing a mended sweatshirt. This hung once at the Wisconsin Museum of Quilts and Fiber Art, and it's a favorite of mine. So here we are at the end of week 4. I've added a moon and rabbit footprints. And keep in mind that once you complete this step, you're going to be at the halfway point. So there's only one more week of applique after this, and then we're going to move on to the quilting step. So stay safe. Hopefully you're enjoying having extra time to quilt lately. And thank you so much for working on this. I really appreciate it. It's so beautiful to see everyone's creativity.